Well, everybody, I want to introduce you to Mark Trussler. He's a fellow of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. He's an examiner. He shoes horses in Scotland and had a big business in England. We had him here in the Heartland, and I took the opportunity to tell you his story. It is a great story. It's inspirational. You're going to get a lot of good out of it, and I really appreciate you watching. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Final Approach with Chris Gregory. And I am here with fellow of the Worshipful Company of Farriers from England by way of Scotland, Mark Trussler. Hired to work a clinic with Cody this week, and how's that going?
Yeah, it's been really, really good. So it's my second time over here in the States, and yeah, it's been really, really good. Completely different area. I've never been to Missouri, so it's been really nice to kind of come and see the landscape, see how things are here.
And you're here in January, which is our nicest month.
Yes, yeah, the weather's superb, and I'm glad I brought my big down jacket and woolly hat. And yeah, the clinic's been really good. I think everybody, yeah, it's definitely, there's been progress in different ways. We had 3 guys working towards their fellowship and 5 associate candidates.
Wow.
Well, so yeah, it was good.
That's a pretty heavy load, huh?
Yeah, but I think try to just break it down into simple steps. And we kind of focused for the associates, focused on the question paper and the oral part of the exams on day 2. So just, yeah, it's kind of set a question, and then we'd break that down, go through the answer together as a group. And that gives everybody a chance to share what they've been thinking or written, and then kind of learn from the others in the group, and then I can give them what's in our marking guide. And so they kind of start to see what a top answer would be and where they are then on a scale close towards that. The fellowship guys, one of them, Emilio, obviously is aiming just for the practical, so we had lots of practical rounds for him on both days, and then 2 of the guys, they've to sit the exam yet, so we did a little bit of practical in the morning, and then they did some surprise lectures in the afternoon, which was great. Actually, they delivered them really well. So
yeah, so Emilio's already passed his communication portion.
Yes.
And so you guys probably heard him on an earlier podcast, and he's probably one of the best farriers in Argentina, and really it's kind of neat to see a South American going from that to the fellowship exam, huh?
Yeah, and I was chatting with Emilio, on the drive over here, and when you think he's the only one in that part of the world that's not just gone to A level, he's going towards the highest level.
Yeah.
And he's forging a path that, but it can be quite hard when you're that far away on your own to keep yourself sharp and at the sharp end of it. So, even more kudos really to him for doing that. And that's where I guess your shoeing school and things is brilliant, because it keeps that connection with him and helps him, kind of, keep himself on track for the exam, because it's a tough test.
It is a tough test.
Yeah, and I think now I often encourage people to find other people who are doing it, so you go through together. I was lucky enough to go through with a group of guys in the UK, and the 4 of us worked together, helping each other. We had private groups on Facebook and things, and we'd be sharing pictures of our work and practice shoes, and then when it came to writing up the thesis, we would be editing for each other, we'd be questioning each other, then we'd send it to somebody else, and it'd come bouncing back, and we'd all moan to each other about how unfair we thought it was, and then kind of, you get yourself together.
Thesis has become huge, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, but you need to go through that process.
Well, when I took the exam, so I became a FW98.
Yeah.
And I wrote a article, more or less, on how I shoe rodeo horses.
Yeah.
And it was anecdotal based. It wasn't, I didn't have to have 100 horses under test conditions. So the thing has evolved quite a bit. Also, my lecture was done with the transparency where you draw with a marker.
Yeah.
PowerPoint was not even in existence. I tried to email my thesis to Ivan Bell. He was one of my mentors.
Yes.
And so I took it to the library. The library was emailing it because I didn't have an email address.
Right.
And like 24 hours later, it still hadn't downloaded in the UK. And so he said, just send me a paper copy. And that was actually faster than email in 1997.
Yeah. And And that's not that long ago in our history, really.
Right. But if you read my thesis,
Yeah.
which is available on the website,
Yeah.
and then compare it to Cody's thesis, it really is like a 10th grader versus a doctorate, you know.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's good. I think it's good to bring that element in. I think the fundamental thing has to be at the core of all of the projects is the relevance to farrier, though. It's got to have a practical application, and I think that's where it's different to other academia.
Right.
Because we are practical people. I'm quoting my mentor now, Martin Deacon.
Martin Deacon, okay.
Yeah, and it was, we're practical people doing a practical job. It's got to make sense. It's got to have some value day to day. So whilst I think statistics and things are really important and they help evidence what we're seeing or you're kind of backing up the results.
So what was your thesis, Mark?
So it was laterally offset hoof capsules, really. So looking at a conformational fault in front feet.
Or hind? Front feet.
Yeah, front feet. And I took 5 horses and I monitored them over a 5-week shoeing cycle over a year, because I was kind of conscious of the changes in the rate of growth throughout the year. And I thought, well, if I pick a certain time of the year, I'm going to struggle to defend this.
Right.
Because you could...
So you take the season out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think particularly when these horses, I kind of tried to pick them on a spectrum of one being pretty low level, little bit of a medial lateral imbalance when they're due for shoeing, not hugely offset, right through to, case number 5, which was just an absolute car crash of a horse in terms of its conformation. And
so a 5-week shoeing cycle, so you're doing them 10 times, and that's
right.
10 feet.
Yeah.
So you have, basically 100 pieces.
Yeah. So I was kind of measuring medial lateral balance. So I kind of made like a flexible head or T-square, and then I would set that down and measure that, and then kind of measure it before and after shoeing all the way through. So I could measure whether I'd been able to trim back to the long axis or not.
Okay.
And if I couldn't get the outside low enough and the medial side was so compressed and crushed, I could record that and then monitor. And I kind of kept a record then of the shoeing cycles for each horse. So I had a client, she was retired, but she'd worked in universities, and she really, really helped me kind of start to format how I was going to do. The other person that had a big influence helping me was, Dr. Simon Curtis, my old training farrier as well. But I kind of got in with Simon a bit later in the project to sort of start the project and to shape my thinking. Sheila was quite influential, and she questioned my ethics. I was
because she question your ethics
a little bit. She was quite a feisty lady, and she would say, "So you can use 2 of my horses, that's fine, but why?" And I would say, "Okay, so I'm going to shoe all the horses with this type of shoe," and she'd say, "Do my horses need that kind of shoe?" Well, not really. Like one of them, yeah, one of them not so much. Well, why are you doing it? How is that ethically in the best interest of my horse? And what it was good is it made me come back to realise what is the core thing about my study. It's to benefit the horse.
And so what did you ultimately find out? What is your thesis saying at the end of the day?
So essentially, the more kind of intervention you put in, the more you can stabilise medial lateral imbalance.
So a regular shoeing cycle done by a competent guy is going to give you better results than not?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could have told you that before you started.
Yeah, I know. So why did I bother? I don't know why I bothered. To be honest, Chris, I'll just stick with you. And the other thing was, so I kind of measured the surface area of the solar aspect, and we kind of compared like before at the start of the year and then at the end of the year. And we also looked at, there was less ways of measuring this, but kind of photographs of the forelimbs before and after. And so again, they changed, the posture of the horse changed. I've got that on presentation of 1 or 2 of them, particularly the worst horse. You can see, the foot is sloping on the lateral side. It's really long compared to the medial side. The coronary band slopes medially because it had this complete medial collapse. And it looks, its whole legs, they look carpal valgus, fetlock valgus. And and by the end of the year, you can still see it's not got brilliant conformation, but they look much straighter. and the feet have
And
changed.
so was that a
quite
horse
advanced.
that hadn't been on your books, and you were able to?
Yeah, so I hadn't been doing it very long, I don't think.
You were able to get that in.
Yeah, and
Nice.
so it was kind of, yeah, there was a few where I had them for a while. So like Sheila, you know, I'd shod her horses for a bit, but one of them was quite new, and one of them we'd been doing for quite a while. And so it was really, I think what I was learning in that process was actually these all have, the one common factor is they all have offset feet, laterally offset, and you can get some horses with medial offset feet, but they're a bit more unusual.
Not in the quarter horse world, by the way.
Not in the quarter horse.
Yeah, you'll get these quarter horses that
Yeah,
they have that offset knee where the
Yeah.
cannon bones way the lateral side of the carpus, and then you have that medial
yeah,
deviation.
the whole thing
at
comes
the
back
fetlock.
under. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
you do get that in some of the, especially like the halter
Yeah,
quarter horse,
yeah.
which you're not going to see in the UK. But
Not so much. I think I've maybe done 4 or 5 quarter horses near where I used to live in England. There was a quarter horse kind of school training centre, breeding farm. So I did pick up 1 or 2, but not many. So yeah, and I think they're quite a unique breed, aren't they? That
but
quite
ultimately,
specialised.
your thesis did it give you a trimming protocol or schedule?
I think
what's your takeaway on that?
Yeah, so I think ultimately what I realised, I started to understand that with some horses, you couldn't trim enough foot off the lateral side to rebalance. So then there was different processes to develop the medial side of the foot, and that could either be through, you know, like a medial lift bar shoe, but ultimately, you were limited if you just used a shoe to how much improvement you would get. Quite often you would need to use some kind of a packer, either a pour-in packer or a pad with a, you know, dental impression material underneath. But ultimately, what I found over the time and measuring the solar surface areas and things, you can massively develop feet and grow them. I think we got, I'm trying to remember now, but I think it was 33% on average improvement through trimming every time. So if you do that consistently and you control the length of the shoeing cycle throughout the whole year, actually those feet developed, they just actually increased in overall size because the whole medial aspect developed. It became much stronger.
Yeah.
And it then, so I suppose from there you would say, well, okay, you're having a huge impact trimming every time, and then the foot is starting to respond to that and it's strengthening and growing, which means there's much less stress internally on the hoof capsule and the structures within it.
Very good.
And so then you reduce risk of lameness, really, you know, and yeah.
Well, I'll often encourage farriers to look at the horse at the end of the shoeing cycle and see if they've made an improvement towards that. And it sounds like you kind of have a protocol where you're, you know, a really good farrier will find the horses in his books continue to improve, and 2 or 3 years later, generally doing good-footed horses.
Yeah.
But if a young guy can understand that early, so they can find your thesis, it might really help them.
Yeah, and I mean, I did a quick survey, and I think that I counted all the horses just the ones I was shoeing, not the ones I was trimming. And I just recorded if they had one offset foot or 2. It was about 43%.
Wow.
So many horses.
Yeah.
And so it's more common, and we just don't seem to kind of really pick on it. But ultimately, when you're battling with a horse that's got quite a strong mediolateral imbalance every time, then there's a cause. So if you understand the cause, then you can explain to the client, and then you can go through various stages of intervention and adding more and more in the more complex it is. And I think the thing that really makes it bad is if you've got a negative HPA.
Right.
Because the excessive load. So I kind of started initially thinking about, you know, level landing, level footfall, and I was trying to work out why are these horses so high laterally after 5-6 weeks, and so crushed medially, and is that what's causing the unlevel footfall? And it then kind of led me more into, well, I can see actually that it's the way the horse is built is the problem. So then I need to change the way I'm trying to manage that. So yeah, hopefully that was the point of at the end of it all. And I think my proudest moment was when I took it to Martin, because he'd been such an influence on me in terms of kind of getting back up to diploma standard. after a few years of kind of wandering in the desert almost, as it were, and losing my way a little bit. And he kind of helped me get back up to a standard and then to push on. And then, and I took it to him, and I sat in the kitchen with him and Sue, and he just read it. And as Martin always did, he would do everything in his head first, and then he would deliver his verdict. And he just turned to me and he said...
So you sat there while he read the 4,000
Yeah,
words?
and I'm sweating a little bit, probably more than I did in the exam.
Did she give you a tomato sandwich?
No, I did get, I think we had lasagna or something like that.
Because when I was with Martin in 1997,
Yeah.
first time I ever had a tomato sandwich.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it was butter and tomato. Is that common?
No, I wouldn't say so. Maybe they thought it was a speciality for you.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I definitely had a lovely lasagna a few times there. But yeah, and he just turned to me and he said, "You've done a good job with that, chap." And he always said chap. That was a phrase he used a lot. And that meant a huge amount. And it gave me the confidence then to say, okay, let's get this submitted.
Yeah. And what year did you do this?
So I think I submitted it at the end of 2015. So I'd passed the practical part of the fellowship a year before, and in April 2015, and then so I sat the theory part in the April or March, higher exams in the UK in 2016, and Simon Moore as well. So we out of the four of us, Simon and myself, kind of went through in 2016 in the April, and I think the other guys went through in the October.
Okay.
And that was, great.
And so now you're 44 years old.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you're doing this when you're in your lower 30s.
Yeah. So
Fantastic.
early 30s, young family. I won't lie, and my wife will listen to this, so I better acknowledge her commitment. She held the family and the home together.
Well, if a guy makes it to that level and maintains his family, it's because the woman was incredibly supportive, or the partner.
Yeah. And there were definitely some tougher days, where it was, why now? Why are we doing this with two toddlers? But actually, I'm grateful, hugely grateful, because it just, you can't, like you said, you've got to have all of you in and going for it. And so, and now it's quite nice because, I don't have that pressure to try and do it. Now I can spend more time with my family and doing stuff. So it's good.
All right. So now you were born in Germany?
Yeah. So my parents, my dad particularly, was in what's called the REME, which is Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, part of the army. And at that point, the REME had bases in Germany.
But your mother was a soldier as well?
I think she was more of like a waitress in the army. Those days, back in the, what would that be, 70s kind of time. I think the army was a huge employer, and so she was. I think she'd done some kind of basic training and things, and she worked mostly kind of in the officers' mess and stuff like that.
But she wasn't carrying a rifle then.
No. And so my dad was in REME, and so they were posted over there. They were married, and then when my mum fell pregnant with me, she stopped being in the army. She came out, and my dad just carried on.
And you are the oldest?
Yep. So I have a younger sister. She's 3.5 years younger than me.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah.
And did you move a lot as a child?
Well, so sadly, we lost my dad in a RTA when I'd just turned 3.
Now, what is an RTA?
A road traffic accident. So
okay.
Yeah.
So you guys use a lot of TLAs?
No, you'll have to talk about TLAs.
3-letter acronyms?
Yeah, no, not really. But I was trying to help you guys because I know you like them over here.
Well, in aviation and military, there's a lot of TLAs. The 3-letter acronym is, but the RTA is a new one to me.
Okay, yeah.
So road traffic accident?
Yeah, or it might be sometimes called an RTC now, I'm not sure. Road traffic collision.
Collision.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's, pick it up off the TV. But essentially, he passed away. So my mum she had me, I was just turned 3. And she was pregnant with my sister, which was pretty tough. So she was. Oh my goodness! Yeah, he was 25. So. Oh, wow! So we came out of the army.
Do you have any memories of him?
Yeah, only a couple, and I have an interesting story. I remember being. So we were obviously in Germany, and we went. There's some photos in photo albums, the way we used to do it, not digital.
Right.
And we went on holiday to Austria once and to Switzerland. And I had this, I have this memory. It's about the one of two memories I have really. And it was like a gravelly beach running down to some water, which was a lake. And I remember getting on a kind of gondola style boat. I remember there being a guy pushing, and I remember being in it, and it was, and so I couldn't remember where that was or anything like that. And then I think it was the year before COVID, we drove down to Austria on a camping holiday, my wife and Clara and Isaac and Eliza, my kids. So we drove all the way down, stayed with a farrier friend in Germany, had a great time staying with them, and then carried on. It was beautiful. But we picked this campsite, and then there's a little bit of Germany called Berchtesgaden, which comes down into Austria. So if you, from where we were staying, if you wanted to go to Salzburg, you had to kind of go through this part of Germany and back out into Austria again. But in Berchtesgaden was this big lake. And so just before we set off, my mum had got the photo albums out, and we looked on the back of the pictures, and that was where I remember.
Wow.
And we went back, and it was so strange because I would have only been 2. And
But
we
you had a
walked into
deja
this.
vu
Yeah,
moment.
I was like, I know I've been here.
Wow.
I remember it. It was so strange. It was a really, and we had a lovely day, and we got on a boat.
Touching memory though, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So obviously at 3, you struggle to have many memories. But yeah, that's one.
Did your mom remarry?
Only probably, she was on her own for, I think, 30 years.
So you didn't have another dad then?
Not really, no.
Okay.
No. And so it's interesting being a dad now. You don't necessarily have what's the word, like a reference point.
Right.
You're just trying to, but I've had some really good guys, male guys, role models, if you like, that I've found, particularly in churches where we've been, who I've watched how they've been a dad. The one guy in particular, AD, who's a bit older, and he's got 4 kids that are all quite a bit older, older than, they're kind of in between me and him in terms of age. And I kind of just see how close, and I suppose I've watched some clients when you go around and you see how close they are with their kids, and you think, that's how I want to be,
of course,
as a family and as a dad. So it's hard. You have a bit of a gap. You don't really have something to follow, but I think maybe in other ways that's good.
Yeah, of course.
I think
you sure made the most of it. I mean,
I'm trying.
Yeah. All right, so you have a single mom with a 3-year-old and a newborn.
Yeah.
And were you living in Germany at the time?
Yeah. So, I think we were. It's either there or we were in Borden in Hampshire, which is further south.
And how in the world did you go from that to getting into horses and being a farrier?
Okay.
Because it takes some doing to become a farrier.
Yeah. And I mean, I was a city kid, really. I grew up. So we moved back to Liverpool, which is where, where my mum was from.
Okay.
And so obviously she went back to be near her parents and her sisters. And so, and then I would travel across.
And you were living in a town or in a city?
We were on the outer edge of the city, really.
Did you have land?
No, so not horsey at all. I mean, we lived in post-war housing estates, which, I mean, completely different to where we are right now. When I look out every window around us and it's just trees and land and horses, we were slap bang in the middle of a street.
With neighbors everywhere.
Yeah. And no green space, really.
Okay.
So we travelled. So one of my dad's older brothers, he is still married to my Auntie Sheila in Scotland. So my dad was from just into Scotland, just across the border. So my Auntie Sheila always had a horse, and my 2 cousins, they rode as well and competed quite a bit. And we'd been up on holiday once, and we'd been plonked on the back of the pony and walked up and down the lane and near where they kept them and stuff, and it was great. And we'd watch my cousins having a training lesson and stuff like that. And so on the way back to Liverpool, and that was a couple of hours drive, my mum said to me and my sister at the time, and we would have been about 9. I was 9, my sister would have been obviously younger, do you fancy some riding lessons? And that was it. She found us a riding school. It was a few miles further out, and it was more into the kind of countryside. So that was Long Acres, it was
What an
called.
amazing thing for her to do.
Yeah.
That had to be a sacrifice. Huh?
Yeah, it was. And I think, yeah, I kind of just latched onto that. I just loved it the more and more I did it. And then I said, I really want to kind of spend my weekend helping out and just being around them all the time. And I think because there was maybe not a lot else going on outside of just family life and school, and I needed something to get my teeth into and to enjoy. And so that's what it was. And it was yeah, I'm very grateful that kind of.
Did you ever become a competitive rider of any sort?
Not really. I did some of the competitions in the riding school, but we were never in a position financially to have our own.
Sure.
And also just because, yeah, where we lived, it wouldn't have been easy to keep.
Right.
One, so you would have been travelling kind of the wrong way, and school was right across into the centre of Liverpool, so that was over an hour every day.
Wow.
To get in and out of school. So just, yeah, it was never an option. But yeah, so I had a little go, but only riding school level.
Yeah, but still give you some access.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be so grateful to your mom for.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what a single mother in England. What, this would be 1990 by then?
Yeah, so I was 1990. I was 10. So yeah, I was kind of having lessons go and then start to help on weekends.
What
and
a
holidays.
blessing, huh?
Yeah, it was good, and I think it's interesting when you say that because you know, again, when you look back, you realise the sacrifices your parent makes.
You sure seem different when you're a parent, don't you?
Yeah, and you appreciate stuff, and I think what I didn't appreciate fully at the time. So when I was going to move away to go to college to do a pre-farrier course, I'd just finished my basic kind of qualifications out of school, so I was 16, and I remember a lady across the road who we knew quite well, and she said, "You can't go and leave your mum." And I was like, well, I've got to go. Like, there's no choice. I've got to go and do this college course, and I've got to write to ATFs and get an apprenticeship. That's just how it works. And in my head, that's it. You're just doing the thing. But actually, she obviously was probably thinking, blimey, this is a big thing for Sue to let her son go. And then I went to Hereford, which was only about an hour and a half. Well, maybe closer to 2 hours away.
And did you stay in Hereford?
Yeah, so I kind of lived in digs, and then
did you meet Adrian Legg?
Yes, I did.
So he was here.
Yeah, right.
He stayed with me for maybe a week.
Yeah.
And everywhere we went, I would introduce him as Adrian from Hereford. I said, he lives in a town that they named after our red and white cows.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to take it. But after about 2 or 3 days, he finally said, you know that.
He bit eventually. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember Adrian. Yeah, that's mad. I forgot. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
A handy blacksmith.
Yeah, he loved his blacksmithing, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry to.
No, you're fine. So I went to Hereford, and then I started applying for apprenticeships, and I got offered a trial with Simon Curtis in Newmarket. So, cutting a long story short, I obviously went through that process.
Hey, we don't have to cut long stories short in this format.
Okay, all right.
So if you have, don't skip
No,
over anything.
I mean, it's only to say, essentially, I think I started the course in the September. I went for a trial in the November, was offered the apprenticeship, and Simon kind of said, look, go home for the Christmas holidays, and instead of going back to Hereford, come here. And that, in those days, that was okay. Whereas now, colleges, they want you to complete the course. It's all to do with funding and all that stuff. So, so I moved to Newmarket, January the 6th, 1997.
What were your living conditions like?
So it was literally the first place I stayed. I think in the 5.5 years I was there, I think I moved 16 times. I counted once.
Wow.
It was a bit mad. But I think generally what happened in the town was you would just rent a room off somebody. And so the guys that were there, they kind of looked in the shop window and said, "Oh, this lady's put an advert up for a room." So I rang her and we arranged it, and my mum drove me down, and it was kind of 5 odd hours drive, and dropped me off. And so I was 16, quite confident, I'm getting on with my life. And it was this lady, and she had lots of these like little glass ornaments everywhere, and loads of cats.
Nice.
And yeah, and it was a bit mad. And
did she try to dress you up or anything?
No, but it was there were certain rules about when I could use a washing machine, and you know, I had no clue what I was doing. And my mum had written out like a binder folder with like basic recipes for making tea, and you know, and I remember she left, and I sat on the bottom of the stairs and cried my heart out. I'm not really a crier, but I did. It was like, whoa, bang. I am on my own, 5 hours away from anybody I know.
And no vehicle.
Yeah, no vehicle. I took my bike because I needed to kind of get around.
And a cat lady.
Yeah, and a crazy cat lady because, yeah. And my mum had forgotten something, and she turned around and came back unbeknown to me.
And found you crying?
Yeah.
Oh,
and I think, man, as a parent, how would I respond to that?
So you said 1997?
Yeah, January 97.
Did you have a phone?
No,
No,
not
okay.
at that point. But not long after, I did get one of those bricks with the
Right,
bottom
right.
bit came and you pulled the aerial out the top,
Yeah.
you know, hello. So, yeah, so that was kind of I remember that moment. And I remember waking up in that place and having to dodge the cat poo to the bathroom in the morning and on the landing. So I didn't stay there very long. And you start to understand maybe why I moved like 16 times. There's all kinds of holes of places I ended up staying.
So what was the worst? Do you have a good story?
That's probably the worst.
So at least you started with the worst.
Yeah, there was a lovely family I stayed with for a while. They had a couple of young kids, and this was kind of like much, you know, 2 or 3 years later. I used to go and play football with the dad and a bunch of other guys. But one of the other apprentices, his brother and friends came down for the weekend from a city further north, Sheffield, and we decided to go on a pub crawl. So we started in these random pubs in the middle of like housing areas, and we kind of worked our way to the top of the high street, and then somebody said, why don't we just go and buy some whiskey and Coke? You know, so we all went back, and all the other apprentices at the time were living in a shared like flat quite close to the high street. So in we go. Yeah,
but you weren't part of that yet.
No, because they didn't have room. So there was like, I think there was 4 or 5 bedrooms, and that was it, and they were all full. So in we went, and there's, I don't know how many of us there were. There was loads of us, and it was kind of whiskey, Coke. You know, that kind of mix. So, you know, we would have only been, I don't know, 19, maybe 20.
Is it legal to drink at that age in England?
Yeah, 18 is the limit.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, but so basically we were all, I mean, I remember people just passing out. You know, they were just zoned out, asleep. And I said, I'll go home to where I stay, I get changed and we go clubbing. So I got on my bike, rode up the high street, and there was this section where I had to go between, there was a racing yard down the side of that, and there were some houses, and then there was this path went through a field, and it was just scrub land, and then the next lot of houses were just up there, and that's where I stayed in the middle of there. And I remember waking up, and I'd set off in the daylight, and I woke up in the middle of this field where I never ever went into the middle of this field, and it was dark. I was absolutely a mess. And I somehow got back to the house, and I always used to lift my bike over the back fence, climb over the fence and go in the back door. That was just what was normal. So I'd done that, don't remember any of that, and I'd gone upstairs, got into bed and gone to sleep. And in the morning I got the tap on the door, and Rob said, are you coming to play football? I'm sure he's called Rob. And I was like, ugh, and I looked, and there was just a brown stain, shall we say, down the wardrobe. So I'd obviously been sick in my paralytic state and not realised, why am I sharing this on a podcast and a YouTube channel? This is not good. And I remember he opened the door and he was like, whoa. So anyway, I did get up and I went and played football, and I was pretty green looking. But I felt a lot better when I got back. But man, his wife, she was so mad.
Oh, really?
And absolutely, like fairly.
It should be.
And I spent the rest of that day, you know, cleaning thoroughly. But yeah, I definitely pushed the boundaries.
Did you get kicked out of that establishment?
No, they were all right, but it definitely wasn't comfortable for a while, you know. And I didn't get that bad again. But man. And needless to say, I didn't make it to the nightclub, you know. I don't think anybody did. I think that, you know, it's just, crazy.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah, it was messy. So that's probably a funny story I can remember.
Yes. Well, how long were you an apprentice? Did you go 5 years or 4 years, 4.5?
Yeah, so the obviously the official apprenticeship I think was 4 years 3 months. I started in the January, and I was holding horses, passing tools, doing all that, and so officially started my probationary period in the July of '97.
Okay.
So I had like 2 months. There's another funny story. So
Okay.
again, just before I officially start my apprenticeship, probationary period, the National Stud, we used to go and do all the work there, and so I'd just passed my driving test, and everybody wanted to go to the party. So Scouse, because I'm from Liverpool, that's the nickname for Scout is Scousers. So everyone said, Scouse, you can drive, and I'm like, great, I can drive. You know, I haven't got a vehicle, so I get any chance I got. I was loving it, but that meant I had to drop them all off all over the area afterwards. So I crawled into bed, I don't know, 2 o'clock, and I didn't wake up till 11.
Oh no.
So I was in big trouble when I arrived at the yard where I should have been at 7 o'clock. And
Were you to meet somebody, or was it just
yeah,
you? Oh.
yeah. So there was an older guy who worked for Simon and Mark, and he looked after that yard, and I was helping him. I was taking off, clenching up, you know, doing stuff like that. So he snitched on me.
Oh no.
And probably rightly so. And I remember everyone saying, right, if Simon, you know, just stay out of the way, and you'll be fine. So Friday came and went, and I thought, I've dodged it, I've got away with it. And Monday morning, the first official day of my probationary period, Simon walked in the forge at lunchtime, and I'm clinging onto a brush or anything to thinking it's going to save me because I'm busy sweeping. And he said, come into the office, Scouse.
Oh no.
He said, what time did you get up on Friday? And, you know, and he said, if you're late again, you're sacked. I was like, whoa, you know, because I'd been a bit sloppy with my timings.
Oh man.
So yeah, it was a big
lesson.
wake up call. Yeah, and I kind of was like, right, got to sort this out.
So are you an on-time farrier now?
Yeah, I'm pretty. Yeah, and if I'm running, I kind of say in my head, and I think I got this from my uncle Robbie actually, but if you're over 10 minutes is kind of okay, it's acceptable, because you could have something that's just held you for 10 minutes. But if you're only more than 10 minutes, you ring. And nowadays with modern technology, it's easy. You just let people know, so they can be, you know, if you're half an hour late, they could be maybe mucking out. They could go and do some field work. They could, you know, they could do something else.
So they're just standing there waiting.
Yeah, and so then when you get there, usually everything's a lot calmer, and you just get on with the job, and they're much more happy because they haven't wasted time waiting. And yeah.
Well, if you respect people's time,
Yeah,
it's you know, because their time is valuable to them.
absolutely.
You might not see it that way, but it's irrelevant.
Yeah, but that I always remember when I moved away from Newmarket and started in Lincoln, that was the biggest complaint people had, was just farriers just not turning up. And I thought, even if I do a bad job, if I turn up on time, I'm going to be busy.
Well, and it's still a complaint. I mean, it's common in our industry for people to not be good about that.
Yeah. So that was, I remember that.
So how old were you when you got married?
25, just before I was 26.
So you'd been qualified and on your own for a while.
Yeah. So I, in answer actually originally to your other question, I was with Simon and Mark's business for about 5-ish years, 5.5 years.
So you stayed on as a qualified man for a little while.
A little bit, yeah, kind of 10 months or so. And then a guy I knew from my college group, he'd gone back to Lincoln. I didn't even know where Lincoln was. He'd set up in business in the January, and I left Curtis's in the May 2022. And I was thinking, I don't even know if I want to do farriery. I was really fed up at that point, you know.
Why?
I think I had a few issues I needed to sort out, and maybe we'll cover that in a bit.
No time like the present?
Well, you know, obviously I have a faith, but at that point I didn't.
Okay.
And I think I'd run to the end of my self, if you like, and you'll know that maybe is a bit of a phrase that sometimes is used in church. You know, you get to the end of yourself.
So were you having sobriety issues, or?
No, didn't have any, but there was just this kind of emptiness. There was a heart-shaped hole, you know, or not a heart-shaped hole, like a God-shaped hole, which is quite a Christian phrase to use. But essentially, I just knew I didn't feel quite content.
Of course.
I remember thinking, I'm in good money. I've got a girlfriend. Like, I'm doing okay. I've got
On
everything you
paper.
need. I've got nice clothes. Yeah, I've got material stuff. But is this it? That was the big question. Is this it? Is this everything? And I just thought, I feel a bit fed up. If that's it, like, what's the point? But I think really what had been happening, I'd been yearning after a bit of, I think, I needed, I was a bit highly kind of, I was angry and wound up quite a lot of the time. I was never settled. And I think I've come to learn later what those triggers were. And a lot of that relates to losing my dad, and I think just, not really dealing with that grief, but growing up, trying to kind of hold it together.
So how did you find your way?
So I started going to a church.
On your own? Or?
Yeah, well, with the girl I was going out with in Newmarket at the time, she kind of went along, and I think another friend came along just to see what weird path I was going on.
This was not Clara.
No, so I didn't meet my wife until I'd moved to Lincoln, and it was a couple of years later.
Okay, all right.
And so, I went along, and I just kind of got this, peace. And I was like, and I remember sitting there, and they did the typical thing, if you'd like to respond to the message today, either come forward and I was so like on the edge of my seat thinking I need to go, but I can't do it. And so that was that. And I think we talked last night, didn't we? And I said throughout the kind of 4 years, the odd times where I got back on a weekend or a holiday and I'd be hungover after being out partying, my mum would tap on the bedroom door and say, "Do you want to come to church with me, love?" on a Sunday morning. And that used to wind me up. I'd be so angry, but I'd do it because I felt I owed my mum, some respect in that kind of way. And I went with her, and but I always came out really filled with like a peaceful feeling.
Even then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then very gradually
had
it would
you ever
ebb
been
away.
baptized as a child?
No.
Okay.
And so, so that was kind of what was going on. That happened in Newmarket, and then I kind of said, actually, I don't want to be in Newmarket anymore. This isn't really where I want to live, and I don't really want to shoe racehorses. It's just, at that point, I was just a bit fed up with everything. I was feeling a bit flat. So I thought, right, I'll just maybe see if I can get home to Liverpool, and that wasn't really looking like an option. And then this guy, James, who's actually sadly passed away, but he'd heard through another college friend that I'd left Curtis's. And so he just texted me middle of the night. And Kelly was saying earlier about God moments. And I think this was one of those for me where, it was starting to direct my path, but I was now starting to follow rather than resisting. And so I got this message saying, "Do you want a shoeing round?" In the middle of the night, I woke up, and this is the early part of having text messages on mobile phones. Didn't know who it was, didn't have the name.
Oh, so you didn't work with him?
No, we'd just been at college every 6 weeks.
Oh, okay,
okay.
He was not, okay, I thought he was one of Simon's apprentices that had gone on.
No.
This is a guy you met through the college.
Yeah, and he trained with the Spence family up in Leicestershire, and then he'd moved back to Lincolnshire. He'd set up in the January, and he decided he wanted to move on and do something different with horses. And he'd heard I'd left. And so he said, "Look, I'm moving. 1st of August, I'm gone." But he said, "There's literally nobody here to take the work on."
Wow.
And so...
What a gift, huh?
Yeah, so he's like, "If you want it."
So God's looking down saying, "Hey, this boy needs a
just
push."
a bit of a different direction. So I said yes, and then I went to church with my auntie and her husband, who's actually just sadly passed away. And so I went to church with them, and that was about 4 days before I was due to move to Lincoln, and that's where I became a Christian. And it was quite a... I'm more emotional about thinking about my auntie's husband, actually. But
so 4 days before you moved, you became a Christian.
Yeah. So my auntie Moy, she's brilliant.
And this was your dad's sister?
No, my mum's youngest sister.
Okay, all right.
She's quite a bit younger than the other 3 sisters.
She's not the one with the horses?
No.
That was your dad's sister?
Yeah, that's my dad's side. That's the Trussler side. This is the Morrison side. So, so Auntie Moy messaged me and said, "Look, I don't know if you're still thinking about... But I've looked online, I've found this church, give it a go." So that was it,
They
really.
didn't even take you to church. You just went on your own.
Yeah, I knew nobody. I knew not a person in Lincolnshire. So I just rocked up, said to this guy, yeah, tell the guy I'll have that caravan you're living in, I'll rent that for a bit. But there's a number of things really, but that was the start. I went to this church for quite a long time, and I was kind of friends with people who were running some of the student stuff, and Clara, my wife, she'd moved at the same time, or a month later. So I moved 1st of August, she moved start of September, ready to start a degree in art. And yeah, we kind of bumped into each other a little bit here and there, because she lived in a town near Hugh Dyer.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She grew up around there, and we used to go to a shoeing competition. And I remember trying to talk to her once and said, oh, you're from Northallerton, aren't you? You know, I used to go to shoeing competition there. Just friendly chat. It wasn't a chat up line really or anything at that moment. And I remember she kind of looked up and went, yeah. And then just carried on texting on her phone. I thought, oh, well, see you later.
Impression made.
Yeah, or not. And so, yeah. And then we got together about 2 years later. I had a complete kind of 2 years nearly of not even going on a date, which was quite different.
How did you guys end up together?
So we used to see each other sometimes at church and things, and then we were at a pancake party. You know, in the UK we have Shrove Tuesday. Have you ever heard of that? Where
I haven't.
It's like you make pancakes, and so a couple from that kind of organised some of the student stuff. They said, "Oh, we're going to have a bit of a party. Everyone come round," and I'd kind of let it be known subtly that I was interested, and I wanted to try and suss her out in the group setting. So it was more cautious. And but again, you know, like you talk about moments, God moments, and at the Christmas, I kind of thought, I really feel like I'm ready to meet someone. And so then this is into February.
Okay.
And that was it. Yeah, we got chatting, and I remember we were all kind of sat around, and people kind of gradually left, and we ended up, managed to move around, and I was thinking, right, I've got a car, I can give her a lift home. I'll ask her if she wants a lift home. So we got chatting and stuff, and she said, oh, you've got a car, haven't you? Can I have a lift home? So I was like, okay, I haven't even had to ask yet, you know? and there was a number of things like that. So we arranged to meet up, I think, the next day, at the end of the week. So that was the Tuesday, and the Friday was my birthday. And I mean, again, this is kind of a measure of Clara, really. I had what I thought was quite a nice car at the time. It was an Audi, you know, lovely German engineer. I'd put it in for service, and they'd give me an even nicer Audi.
Oh, nice.
And I was thinking, I am the bee's knees. Look, she's going to love this. And I rocked up outside a little flat where she was living, and she just got in the car and chatting away and nothing. And I'm thinking, well, she's got to have noticed this really fancy 1.8 turbo Audi I'm driving. So I bring it up. She's like, oh, is it not your car? I didn't realise. And I'm like, oh, what? But really, it kind of shows Clara, she's never been bothered particularly about material stuff. You know, that's not, and I think maybe I had been a lot growing up and felt that was a way of, you know, justifying yourself to everybody else.
Well, I'll tell you what, it does allow a family to have prosperity if you have a woman like that.
Yeah.
Because my wedding ring cost $31 and Kelly's cost $84.
Yeah.
And how many women, and this was 1988, so
yeah.
$84 was more than it is now, but still $84 is not much.
No, you're not into the thousands.
Not even into the hundreds.
Yeah,
you know, and I bought them at a pawn shop.
Yeah.
She's not even, it never bothered her. She doesn't even care for jewelry. So
Yeah.
having a woman like that,
it's good.
It is amazing.
And, you know, she does care about stuff and she likes nice things, but it's not a strong focus. So anyway, I'd messed her about a bit as well, because I'd said about going for lunch, and then this guy I knew from church, who I kind of alluded to earlier, an older guy that I used to meet up with, he texted me and said, oh, it's your birthday tomorrow. Do you want to go for lunch? But obviously he could only do lunch. So I messaged her to say, can we go for breakfast instead? But that was it. And so that's kind of, and then it just went from there.
How long did you date before you were married?
So yeah, 11 months till we got engaged, and then another 11 months till we got married.
Okay, that's a good time.
Yeah.
And so how old were you by the time you finally married?
So we 25 just.
25.
Yeah, and Clara was 21.
21. Oh,
So
wow.
she'd just finished her degree and started working. But kind of at that moment, you know, that was fairly normal in the kind of social circle we were in, loads of our friends. And she'd started, I knew within a month, I was like, this is it. My mum had kind of said, you'll know when you meet the right one.
Yep.
And that always put a kibosh on every other relationship, because I knew fairly quickly it's not going anywhere. But I knew within a month, and Clara needed a little bit longer to be convinced.
Is she convinced now?
I think so, sometimes.
20 years later, huh?
Yeah. So, yeah, and yeah, so, so she'd kind of said to me, oh, you know, don't ask me to marry you for like a while, like giving herself a bit of time. And because I was like ready, you know, ring, but no,
She could read it, huh?
Yeah, and so anyway, and then we got kind of further down the 11 months, and we had a little few days where we had time apart, because we just, yeah, but I think that's okay. I think make and break moments are quite important. And so it was a make moment. And then after that, I remember her saying to me, you know, if you asked me to marry you, I wouldn't say no. And I was like, okay, but you're going to have to wait now, because you told me I had to wait early on. And so I hung on, and over the Christmas period, 2 other friends got engaged, you know, and I was like, oh man, like I'm desperate to get on and do this, but they jumped the gun, and it was a bit out of the blue, you know, nobody knew. So anyway, so we laugh about that. And then, yeah, and then, so it was a good period. And we did like a pre-marriage course with an older couple through church, which was brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
Just working through different aspects. And we always laugh about, we went to the bank to set up joint accounts, and the lady was nearly adamant that we couldn't do it. It was a bad idea. And I think she just looked at us and thought, you guys are so young, you'll not make it.
Right.
And I'd love to meet that lady now.
Yeah.
And say, still going strong.
Well, I had a student one time, and we went to lunch with him and his wife.
Yeah.
And this was in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And the bill came, and we were separate. You know, Kelly and I were paying for ours, they were paying for theirs. And so they got their bill, and he was like, okay, so I had the cheeseburger, that was $4.12, and you had the salad, so that was $3. So your percentage of the tip will be 87 cents or whatever. It was ridiculous. They didn't make it, but you know, and so I asked him about that. It was John. He said, oh yeah. He said, so like if I buy ice cream and she eats it, she owes me money.
Yeah, I mean, everybody works differently, don't they?
Yeah. But you were able to have your wife stay at home and raise your kids.
Yeah, so we kind of really aimed for that. So,
what an important thing, huh?
Yeah, we felt it was really important. I think both of our families come from, you know, backgrounds where they've worked with children.
Okay.
And some of them children. So my mum worked with children in care. Clara's dad did lots of stuff with like young carers. So again, children that had kind of maybe more responsibility than they should have had in an ideal world. And then Janet was she worked with children with visual impairment. So she was assessing babies.
And who's Janet?
That's my mother-in-law.
Okay.
And Graham, my father-in-law. So they, you know, he would go into schools and do assemblies and like.
So they're really sensitive to child rearing.
Yeah, and I think we both have that kind of interest too in kids, and you know, and just kind of want to see them develop and get the best opportunity. So yeah, so I think I've kind of lost where we were going. Where was I going with that?
Well, we were talking about the fact that you were able to leave Clara at home for your kids.
Yeah, so that's why it was really important for us, because we just felt having a stable space for the kids every day. It'd be one of us pick them up from school or take them to school, and you know, and so when they come home, it was downtime and it was family time. And
so, what about your children? Are either one of them going to be a farrier?
I don't know.
Don't know?
I don't think so at the minute. I mean, it was always the chat. Both of them, you know, I think when they were really little, they would, yeah, I'm going to be a farrier. And I don't know whether that's just because, yeah, they just.
I think that's common for a child to admire their dad. But you haven't had one asked to go with you and start talking about college or stuff?
No. I mean, they're obviously, Isaac's a bit on the younger side. If you were going to go down the traditional route, it would probably be more him than my daughter. But I think for us, we've always felt, and I think it would be a real lovely thing if one of them wanted to be a farrier, and we'd make that happen. But I also think I want them to explore and go down the routes that interest them,
Of course. Yeah, yeah.
because I think actually that's really, really important, that you have something that you love doing.
Well, I think being a farrier and not loving it
Yeah.
makes it a terrible job.
Yeah,
It is not. It is not the sort of work that you should do just for the money.
Yeah.
Because you will live a miserable existence.
yeah, yeah. It's not easy.
It's not easy.
And it's there's a lot of pressures with it. No, I totally agree with that.
So, what did you do to get yourself to a fellowship level? What was your ritual? How did you find the time and the drive to do it?
Yeah, you know, sometimes you look back and you think, I actually don't know how I fitted that in, alongside being a dad. And I think in some ways, because Isaac he would have literally been, I think he was so he was born in 2014. So he would have been 2 years old.
Right.
So my thing that I did was bedtime.
Okay.
To give Clara a break. She'd had them all day. And I loved kind of doing bedtime story, getting them settled and getting them off to bed. So I always made a point of doing that, but there was often moments where I would come home, have tea, get them to bed, get back in the van, drive up the road to the forge, and I'd be in the forge till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, come home, shower, bed, get up, repeat.
And so would you forge in the morning as well?
Not really, no. I think just in terms of, you weren't always getting a lot of sleep at night, and I'm not a morning person naturally. So
Oh, you're not?
No, I wasn't then. Clara is, and so as you all know, you kind of morph, don't you?
Yeah.
A bit. So I'm definitely more able to get up and get on with stuff in the day. But I think I would just try and get up, kind of work out what I was doing, where I was going, just get my head in gear, go and do the jobs, because I always felt, if anything went wrong with the forging or something went wrong in the morning before I started work, the pressure's on. You're already late at your first appointment. That means the rest of your day is going to be late.
Right.
And when you maybe would have 4, 5, 6 stops in a day, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there.
Yeah, and you lose an hour by the time.
Man.
Yeah, easily.
And so then you get the pressure's on to get home, to then do tea, bedtime, and then get back out to the forge or study or whatever. Yeah.
So once you decided to become an AW and you started on that path, how long until you passed the exam?
3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I would say I was below diploma level when I kind of realised.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So wow. I remember sitting with a conference, and this is after I'd done my associate, I think. And I was sat and I was talking to a vet who I'd met in Newmarket as an apprentice, and it was actually in Glasgow. It was at the Glasgow Vet School conference, and it would have been about 2013, 2014, something like that maybe. And I remember sitting having breakfast with Tim Greet, and he said, I only believe people move forward or backwards. He said, I don't think anybody ever stays. And I think that's very true. So I passed my diploma with an A and a B+, only just missed out on honours, and that was with Martin Deacon and Sandy Beveridge. So, you know that you were getting a really
good job,
fair test, and so you were obviously, if you got those kind of marks, you were there. And I mean, I don't know what that makes it sound like, but essentially, I was very proud of that. But by the time, what you're talking, so 21, by 9 years later, I was nowhere near. And right. I remember,
because you can get away with less, and
I didn't make any shoes for all of that time. I don't even know why really. I just struggled. I never felt overly confident with the shoemaking.
Did you compete very much?
I hated the pressure, and
really,
I hated it. Yeah, I didn't get on great with that as an apprentice. I did compete more when I started getting ready for my associate.
I'll be dang.
And I've my good friend Jason Brown, who we went through college together. He was the one that kind of gave me the kick up the bum to get me going, dragged me along to some competitions. I remember talking to him and saying, right, I think I need to make some lateral extension shoes. How do you make them? And he was like, right, do this, get this size steel, bump it, and all the rest of it. And I remember I've still got them in a box because they were that bad, right? As a reminder of how far away I was.
So how did you conquer the mental game of getting through the AWCF shoeing without having had the strong competition background?
Practice, lots of clinics, you know, training days, finding other people to kind of muddle along with.
Do you have a mental mindset that you go into, or do you go in there nervous?
Nervous.
Do you really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, I don't know that I'd say I'd get nervous examining, but there's an element of just a little bit uptight, because you're wanting to make sure that you get it right.
Of course.
So I think there's just a bit of a thing there, you know, that I always remember how important and how I felt going into exams. I'm very aware of how candidates feel.
When you're examining.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Because, and I know there has been comments made where people have said, oh yeah, I don't know how to read Trussler. And this is, you get feedback, you find out what some of the candidates are saying. But I think the problem is I'm trying to concentrate so hard on what they're telling me to make sure I don't miss anything, and
So
I give them the marks.
Your face is neutral.
I think, yeah. So I maybe need to get like a face mask with a big smile on it and say, just talk at me.
They had so much trouble with me. My mustache, my cowboy hat, and a white coat.
Yeah.
And so there was a guy that posted on Facebook. He says, I'm getting my apprentice ready. And he had a poster board of a guy with a big mustache and a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Standing over him while he forged.
Yeah.
So I think that was, and then the accent obviously is a little bit different, but I think that added an element that I never even thought it would be, but I think it did.
Yeah, it can do. But again, I think what I came to realise was by the time I'd started to drag myself up to diploma level, and I was obviously seeing Martin regularly, I was showing him shoes I was making, and he was giving me feedback, and we were talking about stuff. And then
was Martin still active farrier?
Yeah. So he was working full time, and he was working every week at a vet hospital, which was about an hour and 15 minutes away. And so at the start of all of this, I'd had a couple of horses I was shoeing go lame. I'd had another job for 3 years, part-time, working with young offenders. And I kind of thought that was my future. I didn't really see a future in shoeing.
Wow.
So I'd kind of, I was on the verge of pulling the trigger and calling time on it.
Wow.
You know,
and were you going to go to college and get a degree for?
Yeah,
for
probably would have done. I mean, I ended up getting a job. Yeah, as I say, part-time, covering a maternity post, and then they kept me on. But at that point, we bought a house that was an absolute wreck. We were trying to extend it, renovate it. So I was doing work on that mornings and evenings, shoeing, and then going and trying to do this office job. And it just was mental. And ultimately, I didn't do anything very well.
Right.
So I understand when farriers feel that, you know, they're being undermined, or they don't feel overly confident in their work or whatever. But actually, more often than not, it's because you're not putting enough in to get enough out. And I always remember clients say, my horse's feet never used to toe in like they are now. Why is that? And I struggle to know what to say. And this is on the back of coming out with an A and a B+.
Of your diploma?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how had I fallen that far away? It's because I didn't invest at all.
Yeah.
And I think CPD in the UK is mandatory, and lots of farriers grumble and moan about it, but actually it's a gift in a lot of ways, because it will keep you moving forward and developing, and then you're worth more, so you can charge more, you can justify that, because you've learned stuff, you've been on a specific course for something, and you probably will pick something up if you go with the right mindset. I think the time, so I had some horses, I decided I was going to jack that other job in, come back to shoeing full time, and I felt I needed to really go for it and invest in it and actually do it properly. And so at the same time, I had 2 horses go down to Martin. They were lame. And they went down for lameness investigation, and the thing that changed was the shoeing, and they were sound. And I thought, I can't afford to lose these clients, so I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go and see what Martin's doing. And I remember we were stood in the car park outside the forge watching these horses, and he says, right, can you see how this horse is moving, and its foot's doing this and it's doing that? And I was looking and thinking, what are you seeing? I'm not seeing that. And then that worried me. So then I thought, right, I'm taking a day off every month and I'm coming down. And I did that for a couple of years.
Nice.
And that was the because after the fourth or fifth time of watching horses with him, I started to see it. And then I started to think, well, what's he doing? How's he trimming the foot? And I'd look at the shoe fit, and we'd have discussions, and then and it was quite a lengthy process. It took a while, and I gradually started to change the way I dress feet, change the way I fitted, sizes of shoes, things like that, because I would start going home and looking at horses. Say, can you walk your horse for me? But actually, clients, they loved it. The more I did it, because I was interested.
Sure.
So I'd gone from just turning up, rattling shoes on, get on to the next one. I feel very lucky really to have had that chance again. And I think the more I went consistently, the more I think Martin knew I was serious about getting good. And years later, he kind of said to me, you know, the best thing actually was that you came with no confidence, because you just took everything on board. You listened to everything. And I think, so again, you look back and you think, that's one of those moments where there was an opportunity and I took it and I made the most of that, and I learned a lot, and it had a big impact. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah, very grateful.
Well, I want to move to the next bit.
Yeah.
So you have a full practice in the United Kingdom, and you just moved to Scotland.
Yeah.
What caused that to happen?
So I think I'd been over here, been at the International Hoof Care Summit.
In what year?
So that was the year of COVID, 2000.
2020?
Yeah, 2020. And so I'd come over. I knew Jim Ferry through the exam board, and I'd worked with him on examining only a couple of times, but I didn't know him socially. And so we ended up. He obviously had his heart attack at that conference, and so I'd spent quite a bit of time with Jim over the previous couple of nights.
Have you seen his tattoo?
I've seen a couple of tattoos. It depends which one. I don't know.
What does he got? Does he got an angel? Or what's he got shoeing a horse? Doesn't he have Casper shoeing a horse or something like that?
I don't know. I don't. Yeah.
I'll have to ask Kelly. They got drunk at Cincinnati one time, and Jim was showing this. You know, it's not a tattoo. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jim, I'm sorry you were listening.
Yeah. So I'd been out for meals with Jim and some other guys, some Swedish farriers and Simon Curtis, and it was great. And I'd kind of got to know him a little bit more personally, and then I kept in touch with him after the event. And obviously we'd flown home a month or so later. We're into COVID, and we were then added onto like a WhatsApp group. There was about 10 of us: Simon Curtis, Sarah Logie, Simon Moore, Stephen Hill, Jay Tovey.
And you're not an examiner yet, right?
Yeah, no, I was an examiner at this
You were
point.
already an examiner.
Yeah, so
okay.
I'd been examining nearly 4 years at this point.
Okay, because you came on as an examiner right after I left.
Yeah, about 2016.
Okay, and I left about 2015.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think the first lockdown in COVID, we were meeting every Wednesday night, and we'd have an hour. We'd have a farrier-related topic, and different people would chair the subject for the evening, and we'd have a drink and a bit of banter. And you know, it was a nice thing, and Simon set that up, and it was great. So my wife had said to me, and we talked a little bit about moving, and she said, "I really want to move. I don't want to. I think we need to make that decision and get on with it." I think for lifestyle, really, we love the outdoors. Yeah.
And were you living in town?
No, we were in a village not far from Lincoln City. Lincoln is quite similar to here. It's very flat. A lot of farming. A lot of crop growing, but when you love mountains and they kind of just make your heart feel happy, being around them, climbing them, biking on them, whatever, we were finding it harder and harder to get away to, you know, those places that we just love being, and you couldn't do it easily. You couldn't just get in the car and go in a day and back. You were talking a good couple of hours driving, and the kids were getting more capable as they were growing. And yeah, so I think we'd had this kind of rumbling for a long time, and it was a bit of a joke with friends that wherever we went, we would be looking in the window of the estate agents. Oh, what's it like to buy a house here? You know. So so I think Lincoln was good and it was fine, but it never really felt like home, and I think that was probably the best way to describe it. And so we looked at Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, and realised that probably wasn't going to work. And then I kind of would ring Jim occasionally and have a chat, and I rang him one day and I said, is the situation in Scotland, are you quite short of farriers? Because that had been mentioned a couple of times, you know, and I knew that other farriers had moved, Cliff Barnes and people like that had moved from England right up north and stuff. So Jim, yeah, he kind of said, yeah, it is. We had a good chat, and I explained that had been thinking about moving in, and he said, well, come and have a couple of days, have a look around and have a chat. So that was really the start, and it's funny, within a month of moving to Scotland, it felt like home.
Oh,
There
really?
were a few other things that along
Now,
the way.
were you able to buy land?
No, I thought we would. And I think people said, you know, when we were in, oh, you'll be able to buy a castle, won't you? And all the rest of it. Actually, I would say property, it was more expensive in Scotland.
Oh, so you moved to a more expensive.
Yeah, I think the area where we are is quite central, and a lot of people had moved out of Glasgow and Edinburgh to the area where we are, near Stirling,
Now,
because it's very commutable.
did you go back to Lincoln and service horses for a while?
Yes, for about 5 months.
Okay.
And kind of, I'd chatted with some other guys that had worked with me as they'd like newly qualified. They would come and help me a little bit when I was over busy and stuff. And that also helped me then have a bit more family time if we kind of built up a couple of days every couple of weeks or whatever. So I'd said to them, look, I really need the income because I've gone and started again and I haven't got any income. So if you're happy with the arrangement, come and work with me. I'll show you everything I'm doing with all the horses, and we'll do that maybe for 3 goes, and gradually you do more of the fitting and the trimming, and I'll do the donkey work. But essentially we get them done. I can get enough done to make a bit of money to make it worth, you know, then I've still got an income for the family. But I can't afford to pay you, but you will get the work.
Right.
And that's kind of how it went, really. And the guys were really good.
When I moved to Missouri, I left Colorado in '94, and I was making $11,000 a month with a part-time shoeing business and horseshoeing school.
Yeah.
My first month in Missouri, I made $45. I shod one horse for $45.
Yeah.
And I'd been getting $75 a horse in Colorado, but I gave my business to one of my graduates.
Yeah.
But the only catch was I would go back every 6 weeks. He would pick me up. He would put me up. I would use his rigs, his shoes, his nails. Like he was just.
Yeah.
And he would work for me like a Hebrew slave.
Okay.
And I'd do 33 head in 2 days.
Yeah.
And I'd make $2,500.
Yeah.
And that's what kept us alive
Yeah.
for really the first year, maybe 18 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was kind of, I think I got to about May time because I was thinking, this isn't picking up as in the way I thought it would. You know, it was a bit slow to start with, but it was the winter time. And I guess.
And what year?
So this was 2022.
So in the height of COVID, or are you guys still locked down, or is it over?
No, it kind of, yeah, it all
was
opened
over.
up and stuff. Yeah, we were
Okay.
pretty much past that. I mean, they still did COVID testing and things. And so, yeah, and then I kind of got to about May time and the phone started to ring. And yeah, and then I started to pick up.
And now you're where you want to be?
Pretty much, yeah.
How
Yeah, I
nice.
mean, so it's been, 3 years and you kind of think, well, that's really good.
And what are you able to charge to shoe a horse, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so it's around like £130 for a set.
Okay.
And then I think, what I would say is I think the cost of living in Scotland is actually more than where we were.
Were you getting 130 in Lincoln?
No, at the time. So that was like, obviously we left in COVID times, but that was when the prices of everything started to climb ridiculous.
Yep.
So probably would have ended up not far away. Some horses I was on that nearly at that kind of money.
So you were under 130 in Lincoln?
Yeah, well, yes. So it depended. Some of my competition yards, they were more, but it was kind of, at that point I was taking them on and I was saying, well, this is the price.
Right.
Some of my clients that I'd had for 15 plus years,
Yeah, it's hard to go up on them.
Yeah, and you kind of like, well, I kind of, I've got to go up a bit, and you do it, don't you? You try and be careful and you think about them a bit as well, because inevitably you do get to know these people well over that time and stuff. But at the end of the day, the costs have just gone up so much.
Yeah, and you have to make a living.
Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like quite a bit. I know it's more than maybe other parts of England, really, but the cost of living is,
Quite
to get work done on the house, and we're trying to renovate and extend, it's way more.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, really, because there's just not that many people around. There's not that many trades
Yep.
guys. There's not as much. Whereas I think in England there's more people, there's more farriers, there's more trades. So everything's a bit lower to try and be competitive. I think.
Yeah, yeah. You got 5 choices instead of 3.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's have you teach me something.
So I'm quite into my cycling. I really like mountain biking. So I think.
And so a mountain bike, just so I know, is a big fat tire.
No, that's a
No.
fat bike.
That's a fat bike. Okay. and the really narrow tire is a roadster.
Yeah, well, I mean, even this chat is going to teach you something. So we're going to teach you about the completely different range of bikes.
Okay.
So you've kind of got full-on downhill racing. So the whole geometry of them is set up in such a way they're sat really low at the back.
You know, these are ones without even chains and pedals, right? They just go downhill.
Oh no, they've got chains and pedals as well. Because
But there is a mountain biking where they go downhill with all they have is brakes.
Yes, they do that, but usually at kind of enduro events, but it's kind of like, so it's all about technique.
Okay.
It's like anything, your body position, same as riding horses, body position makes a big difference. And then, you know, one of the things I learned, you know, you're talking about suspension travel on a bike, and you can maybe have, you know, 170 mil, but actually your arm is way more. So you don't rely on the suspension just on the bike.
Your body is the suspension.
Yeah, you are pumping and pushing and using the terrain and driving the bike into it to accelerate, and you become much more efficient.
Do you wear spandex shorts?
Yeah.
So that's why you got into
I
it.
love it, yeah. Makes me feel great. Not when I'm mountain biking. It's unless you're racing, it's a bit of a, what's that guy doing? You know, he's a bit weird.
Okay. All right.
So, you know, you've kind of got anything from your light, fast, short travel, racy kind of setups through to your big downhill rigs. And then you've got enduro, which I'm hoping to do my first enduros this year with Isaac.
Is it a race?
Yeah, it's timed sections. So there'll be a course, and the enduro for the mountain biking is, you go through a start gate, you've got a timing chip on either your wrist or on the handlebars, and away you go and you race down. But Isaac has lessons on a Saturday, like 3 hours, and so I ride sometimes with some of the other dads, and Isaac really wants to race. He wants to have a go. So I've been talking with another dad in particular who he has himself raced downhill in his younger days. He's pretty switched on guy, and he's quite a talented rider, I think. So he's given me a nod. So in Aberdeenshire, which is kind of about 2 and a bit hours away, more towards the east side of Scotland, there's a series of 4 enduro races, and they let kids race under 12, but you have to chaperone them. So Isaac will head off and I'll follow him down.
Nice.
That'll be an awesome moment. But some of the things, I just love it when we get out on a mountain or a trail. And more often than not, he says, you go first. But he is starting to get to that point where, shall I go first, Dad? So he's not long going to be way ahead of me. But I've still got a bit more stamina than him.
So you're going to teach me one thing about this.
Yeah, so kind of gap jumping. So that's where you have a ramp up, and then there's a gap of varying lengths, and then a down ramp. And so the way you need to approach that, you need to learn how to pump and push with your body.
All right.
So you can press your body as you're coming up, and then you extend, and that gives you the lift.
Okay.
And then
just like jumping with skis, if you get your knees going, it's not just momentum. It is not just trajectory, but you get a lot of that with your body.
Yeah, suspension is your knees as well, isn't it? And it's the same on the bike, so it's arms and legs.
Nice.
You can press and extend, and that's what pushes the bike, gives you the traction when you need it, but also if there's a bit of a drop or like a roller, that's where you can use that to generate more speed, which I suspect might be the same in skiing. If you've got a bit of a hump, you can generate some
So you're not a
speed off
skier?
that. No.
All right.
No.
So you know why the bicycle couldn't stand without a kickstand?
No.
It was too tired.
Oh, that is terrible. And I know where we're going now.
All right, let's hear your dad joke.
Okay, so this joke is for my kids because they love this one. And I think, so it's a knock knock joke.
Okay.
Okay, so knock knock.
Who's there?
Atch.
At you?
Bless you. It's
Yeah,
terrible, but it
well-
works every time. I love it.
So you guys can vote. Was mine better, or did you guys like Mark's? And then do you have a inspirational saying?
Inspirational saying. I'm terrible at thinking on the spot.
That's why I gave this to you ahead of time.
Yeah, I know, and I struggle with the other two thinking of something. I'm trying to think whether... I don't think there's anything I can think of that's like a famous saying. I'll think of it when this is all finished and playing, and I'll be listening to myself thinking, that's horrendous. Why didn't I think of that? But essentially, I think, yeah, maybe something that I kind of live by day to day in terms of a work thing is I think you should... There's only one way to do things, and that's properly, you know. So you do everything thoroughly at once, and then you move on to the next thing. I hate kind of circling back and redoing, and so I don't know if that...
Get your toe right before you make your heel.
Yeah. You're never going to fit your heels and your quarters if your toes all over the place.
Yep.
So it's just a step-by-step process. Keep things simple. That's another thing Simon taught me. That's maybe
Well,
a
that's
good...
the saying, right?
Yeah. KISS. He added on an extra S though.
Yeah, it's for stupid.
Yeah. And it's
Well, that's a very military thing. KISS, the KISS principle is keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
No, it's been quite an in-depth chat, hasn't it?
It's been wonderful.
I think I've shared far more than I ever thought I would.
More than you intended.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, all of the gentlemen that were here for the clinic thought it was just tremendous and got a ton out of it. So thank you very much for doing that. Yeah. And you've been a wonderful guest. So
and you've been a wonderful host. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's
well
great.
done, sir.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Heartland Horseshoe School has been going for 30 years this year. So this is 2025. We started in 1995. We're having a big celebration. We're going to have a contest. Jace Ellis is going to cook a pig. Our celebration is going to be May 9th and 10th at Heartland Horseshoe School. We're going to have a contest, giving away $1,000 added and buckles in every division. And everyone is welcome. We'd love to see you there. Thank you.